Welcome back. Music fans the world over are mourning the death of rock star Prince, who died unexpectedly this week at the age of 57. His musical skills were legendary, and he was one of the most enduring, creative, and prolific pop stars of the modern era. Joining us now with some reflections, music journalist Marcus Moore. He writes for the website Pitchfork and for the Washington Post. Marcus, great to have you here today. I wish the circumstances were different, but we appreciate very much your time. Talk to us about what Prince brought to the table, why he delighted fans the world over.
You know, when I think of somebody like Prince, I just think of somebody who was the definition of an artist. He was a guy who redefined what masculinity was. You know, when I think of Prince, I put him in the same box as David Bowie, you know, as a guy who didn't necessarily need all the bravado. He didn't need to pound his chest and say who he was. He was just a guy who, you know, his creative light just shined the world over, and you could hear it in his music, and you can hear it in all the different hybrids of funk and soul and jazz and blues and everything that he did. And so I think people are mourning Prince because he was pretty much everybody's, you know, he belonged to everybody. The type of music that he did definitely was heard the world over, and it's definitely a huge loss.
His first hits were in the very late 70s and throughout the 80s, and of course beyond. But, you know, I can't help but think of this a little bit from the perspective of my own life. His songs were the sort of the soundtrack of my college years and my early adult years, and I was struck by the fact that President Obama, born the same year as I was, marked the passing of Prince with a very heartfelt set of remembrances. He very much, for all the success he had in the years since the 80s, you can't help but talk at least a little bit about how his music, his fashion sense, and his broader cultural imprint were so much a part of the 80s.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, and you can hear it now when you listen to certain artists, you know, whether it's Frank Ocean or whether it's, you know, an artist like Bilal or Janelle Monáe or whoever, or even more recently Esperanza Spalding on her new work. You can definitely hear all of those influences, and you can see those influences in the dance moves and the live shows and things of that nature. And again, I think to your point, you just said that he just spoke to so many different people because his music touched so many different genres that pretty much everybody has a favorite Prince song. It can be When Doves Cry, it can be Kiss, it can be Purple Rain, whatever, because he had so much music that touched so many different people. You know, I think that's why this one definitely stung, because he touched all factions of people, and he touched all races, all generations, everything, and, you know, from his fashion sense to his music. So it's definitely a huge loss, and I think, you know, the fact that we're talking about him here now really speaks volumes.
Marcus, stay on the line, please. I want to bring in commentator Sharon Morton. Sharon, it's always good to talk with you, and I wanted just, we're all sort of mourning and sad, and I know just from us being friends that you were a huge fan, loved the music. It spoke to a certain period of our lives. He was an enduring, incredibly prolific talent. Your reflections on the passing of Prince.
Yes, I, like everyone else, I felt like I knew him. His first acclaimed single, I Want to Be Your Lover, came out when I was just 14 years old, and I remember singing it whenever I was out of my parents' earshot because I didn't, it was my first time ever hearing such explicit lyrics. But my friends and I, you know, we just adored him. That happens to be my favorite Prince song, by the way, Adore. And I remember going to his concert at the Capitol Center. I think I was like 18 or 19 years old, and my mouth dropped to the floor when the curtain opened, and there was a bed in the middle of the stage with Prince in it. And, I mean, it was one of the best shows ever. I think, like Michael Jackson, he was one of the most gifted and prolific musicians of our time. And he'll definitely be missed. I'm just glad last summer I had another chance to see him.
Where?
And in Baltimore.
What was it like?
It was simply amazing. I mean, Prince gave his all. to his fans. And the show was supposed to end at, I think, around 11:30. We didn't get out of there until almost 1 a.m. I mean, he sang every song. And I'm just so happy I had that opportunity to see him again.
Let's touch, Marcus, if we can, again on fashion, and you referenced this a bit, but I want to talk about it a bit more. Here we are in 2016, where the sort of anything goes notion of what you wear or don't wear is so common. There's almost a sense, sad to say perhaps, that it's all been done. When Prince was new, and those fashions and that clothing, it was much more gender bending. It was more exciting in terms of the creativity that he brought to the table. Can you reflect on what he meant to the world of pop culture on that score?
Well, you know, and that's just the thing. You know, when Prince first came out, no one knew what to make of this guy. Like, okay, you know, it's like the music itself was really good. You could tell that there was definitely some talent there. But then when you actually saw him and you saw the stuff that he would wear, it's like you didn't know what to expect. And I think, you know, you just touched on it. When you look at a lot of the fashion now, and when you look at a lot of the music videos, and you just, you know, I go to a lot of concerts and I see a lot of the, you know, the fashion that's being worn today, and it's definitely a reflection of the 80s. And honestly, it ties right back to Prince, and it ties back to, in a way, it ties back to Michael Jackson. You know, it ties back to just that mode of creative expression where you didn't have to be a certain way, you know, because your music is going to speak volumes. So you didn't have to look a certain way to have your music sound a certain way, you know. So somebody like Prince, he just came out, he was himself. He never beat on his chest and said that, oh, I'm Prince, so I do this, that, and the third. He just went out there and did it, and we all just accepted it because, you know, when you listen to the music, it was just so great, and it was just so iconic and so legendary even back then. So, you know, in a way, when you listen to a lot of the music now, it's all a direct reflection of Purple Rain and Sign of the Times in 1999, and the things that he wore was definitely a reflection of that as well.
Sharon, I love that Prince was turning out really quality music for many decades, deep into his 50s. And I was struck by something I heard on the radio from a DJ, I guess, who said he was tough to peg in terms of the type of music that he did. That was undoubtedly part of the appeal. His music spanned the sort of the lanes that we often put music in.
Yes, it did. And I saw yesterday a clip where he said, you know, we live in a single-driven market, but I come from the old school and believe in making albums and the best music, and that's what I'll always do. And he lived by that. And I think, you know, all of his fans appreciated him for that. And even when he, you know, stopped using his name, Prince, and he was known as the artist formerly known as Prince,
with the
he continued to produce great music. You know, he continued to release great albums. I know even when I was a kid, I think I was a freshman in college, and Purple Rain came out, you know, and that was the movie and the soundtrack that propelled him to stardom. We had already been mesmerized by him. I mean, the world knew him when he began to be noticed on MTV. But, you know, us young teenagers and college students, we knew his music. We loved his music. We followed him with his bands, Prince and the Revolution, and then Prince and the New Power Generation. I mean, we stayed with him, and he has inspired millions of people. He was an unparalleled musical genius.
Sharon, describe the crowd at the concert you attended last year in Baltimore. I'm guessing it was pretty diverse.
Oh, there was everybody in the crowd. I mean, young and old, black, white, Asian, Native American, everybody loved Prince, and that's what his fan base reflected when you went there. I mean, straight, gay, in between, everyone appreciated him and his music, and he gave us his all. There were no shortcuts. None at all. And what I also loved about Prince is that he was socially conscious as well. He did a lot of he gave away a lot of money. He was a philanthropist, and he didn't brag about it. He was very conscious, and you could hear a lot of that in some of his music as well.
Marcus, can you talk about Prince, the musician? For a lot of people, we associate him with catchy songs, songs that you can hum. You hear the name Prince, your mind goes to the mega hits that he had, even though he had hundreds, maybe thousands of songs, but certainly hundreds. Beyond that, though, was a musical skill. He wrote pop songs for other artists. He was a really accomplished musician in the purest sense. Can you reflect on that?
Sure. And you just touched on it. When you think of Prince, you just think he's a guy who pretty much did everything himself. Because he had the talent to do so, and he had this drive. It's like we all knew him as an exceptional guitar player, an exceptional guitarist, but he mastered all kinds of things. He just mastered sound, and he created his own sound. And not too long ago, there was a box set that came out, of that talked about the Minneapolis sound, the sound that he and like Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Morris Day sort of crafted. And I think that speaks directly to his work ethic, the fact that here's a guy who wanted to do everything himself because, quite honestly, no one could do it like him. I can't imagine him directing anybody else to do what he did. It was just, his art was just such a mastery of his own willpower to be great, and just you could tell that it was just time spent alone, him reflecting on what he wanted to do and what he wanted to create for the world. And you could hear it on every album, not just the ones that we know about. You could hear him on all kinds of stuff that we don't even know came out. He had like 39 records. So he just, he did everything. He did everything very well, and we just accepted it because his light was just so bright,
Marcus and Sharon, if you can stay on the line for a moment, I do need to sneak in a break, but I would love to continue our conversation with both of you on the other side of the break, if you're able. We'll pause here, continuing to remember the life and legacy of the great artist Prince as we continue here on Newstalk right after this.